What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? We are here. Indigo. We are here. Chapters 1 through 3. We're going to talk about it today. So, those of you who are reading the book, you guys are probably further than chapters 1 through 3. Mind you, I've read this book a million times. But today we're going to talk about chapters 1 through 3. So, we start off with the prologue. Most of Beverly Jenkins books have a prologue and an epilogue because the prologue usually gives you the. Anyway, y'all know what a prologue is, child. I ain't talking to y'all like y'all crazy. So the prologue is a series of letters between someone named Catherine and someone named David. And we found out that David, who was a free black man, actually allowed himself to be sold into slavery for love. He's writing these letters to his sister, and he's explaining to his sister what happened, why he did it, why he felt the need to do it, and that the the slave master had agreed to not break up the family. However, he died, and his son did not make that same promise, and so his son immediately sold off his wife, who he had sold himself into slavery for, and his daughter. His daughter is by the name of Hester, and so he tells his sister, "Listen, I need you to use whatever money I have, whatever property I have, and I need you to move mountains, move heaven and earth to find my daughter. This is where I think she was sent to. She was sent down to South Carolina, and we marked her. We cut off the tip of her finger so that she could be found in case of a situation like this." Now, a couple of things I wanted to go ahead and discuss really quickly. One, this happened more often than people might realize, that because of the brutality of slavery, parents knew that at any moment their child could be sold off into slavery. At any point in time, their child could be, or they could be sold away from their child. And so parents oftentimes would mark their children. They would cut the tip of their ear off. They would cut, like in this case, the tip of the finger off. So this isn't something that's unheard of, okay? Also, selling yourself into slavery. Now, it is ridiculous. By today's standards, ain't that much love in the world, okay? But, at least for me, maybe for some other people. But again, this is not like the only time we've ever seen this happen. We've heard stories of freedmen falling in love with slaves and paying, trying to buy the freedom, and that being a never-ending cycle. Every time they would get enough money, then the slave owner would up the amount, and just all types of games that were played. And so David felt like he just couldn't wait for whatever those situations were. He could not wait, and he was in love, and that's who it was. And so, y'all can put in the comments, do y'all think that was a rash decision? I mean, was that like a wonderful example of love, or was that like, dude, you could have just waited till nighttime and kidnapped her? Okay. So chapter 1 starts, we are now in Whitaker, Michigan. So again, the last letter that we had was dated 1833. So we have fast forwarded to 1858. So we're, a few years later, and we're now in Whitaker, Michigan, right? Oh, and David also let it be known to his sister that he had a disease and he was dying. So he's about to be dead. So we pick up in Whitaker, Michigan, okay? And I'm not gonna read this book, okay? I'm just telling y'all what's going on, okay? Hester is minding her business, okay? She is chilling at her house, she's minding her business, and she hears these 3 loud thumps under the floorboard. So she quickly moves the floorboard, opens it up, and she finds Mr. Wood, an old Quaker. Now, I underlined the word Quaker because, again, throughout history, I think we do a disservice to ourselves in not understanding that all white people were not the problem. There were a lot of white people who were out here who were consciously trying to help us, who were genuinely against slavery and worked to end slavery. And the Quakers were definitely one of them. The state of Pennsylvania was founded. William Penn, who was a Quaker and totally against slavery. And so Mr. Wood, although it's not specifically stated that he's white, he's a Quaker, he's probably white. But he is a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And he's bringing in some cargo. We find out that Hester, fast forward, this is the baby that David was looking for. Hester is now a conductor on the Underground Railroad up in Michigan, up in Whitaker, Michigan, and um, he's bringing cargo in. He has a family, and she talks about how the family held up, even though a lot of times, babies and young children didn't do too well on the trip from the south to the north, but they did. They made it, and she, she was expecting the cargo. They would call it the cargo. She was expecting the cargo, and she had food and warm blankets and all that kind of stuff. But then Mr. Wood says, "Hey, I got something else for you. I need you to come and come down." And we find out that she has her cellar, and she has a secret entrance into the cellar with a secret room, which is where she keeps the cargo. That actually has a tunnel that takes you out to the river, and that's where Mr. Wood had the he had his wagon, and he said, "Listen," he was like, "I got a guy here. He was beat up really badly. I need your help getting him out the wagon." And so we get to the wagon, and the wagon has a false bottom, and so he gets through the false bottom. And I need you guys to picture all of these different things as you're reading it. Again, I want you guys to understand that all of these things are realistic things. This is not something that Beverly Jenkins pulled from the sky. This is realistic. I know we hear about the Underground Railroad, but I don't know if we understand all the different intricacies of the Underground Railroad. And it wasn't unrealistic for people to have houses that have either been built specifically for the purpose of housing runaway slaves or had been adapted to be able to secretly hide runaway slaves. But during the Underground Railroad, sometimes it wasn't as lavish as what we're reading about with Hester's house. Sometimes it's just as simple as somebody hiding them in somebody being, hidden in a chest for a day until they can move them to the next station and things like that. Sometimes it was just under a bed. It wasn't always this elaborate. But we find out later on that this house was specifically built to be a station on the Underground Railroad. So when we read about this tunnel and we read about the secret room and all of that, it was built to be this, right? Okay. So she helps Mr. Wood get the guy out of get him out of the wagon, and he is beat up really, really badly. He's stabbed, his face is all swollen. We find out later on his ankle is really sprained really badly, and so she gets him in. They get him on the cot, and she said, "I need you to go, get B. Hold on, I underlined her name. B. Muldrum. B is like the local doctor. Again, no hospitals. Even if there were hospitals, you can't call the hospital and say, 'Hey, I got this beat up, runaway slave, in my house. Could you come help me out?'" So B came to stitch him up, and before B got there, we let Hester know who he was, and he is the Black Daniel. Now, the Black Daniel was you could equate that character to like a Harriet Tubman, someone that the slave captors were looking for. They knew him. They had named him the Black Daniel, just like they had named Harriet Tubman, Moses, and they were like, "He is out here helping our slaves escape, and we need to get him, and we need to get him now." So there was a bounty on his head, and so when B got there, B asked, "Who is he?" And even though she could be trusted and she was a part of the Underground Railroad, Mr. Woods was like, "Don't tell her who that is." And so Hester just said, "Hey, he's a friend." And B understood, because she understood that even though she was in the circle and she could be trusted, everybody didn't need to know everything, because the reality is the less is better, And the Black Daniel was such a notorious character and had such a bounty on his head. It really was to protect her as much as it was to protect them or him. So she stitches him up as best as she can, and she tells Hester, "Listen, give him his medicine. I'll be back in the morning to check on him. Do this, do that, da 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 da." So she actually stays down in the room with him. She says, even though the medicine is going to knock him out for the remainder of the night, I need to kind of be here as much as I can to I just want to keep an eye on him. And so she ends up doing that. She ends up keeping an eye on him. And he wakes up, the next morning. she wakes up and doesn't see him in the bed, and he's already standing up. And he's like, is there some place that a man can relieve himself around here? Because remember, y'all, it's 1800s. We don't have no whole lot of indoor plumbing and all that good stuff. And so she was like, there is a potty over there. There's a bowl over there. Um, you know, that's what people use, a chamber pot. And he didn't want to use it. You know, he was like, listen, I promise you, if I go over there and use that chamber pot, the only person that's going to be embarrassed is you. Girl. So she was like, listen, you can go up the steps, around the house, to the back, okay, to the outhouse. And so she tells him, she said, but you really should not be walking on your leg this much. Like, you really shouldn't be doing it. And he's stubborn, and he went on and did it anyway. Of course, he was huffing and puffing and pale by the time he got back. And so, they end up having a conversation, and he tells her, he said, listen, can he be trusted? Like, can these people be trusted that you, like, can you even be trusted? And she was like, all of us can be trusted, because we are all in this together. And he was like, nah, but somebody betrayed me. And as they were trying to kill me, they said it came from Whitaker. And she was like, so we believe in slave catchers now? Like, we believing that the slave catchers are talking that good stuff? At the end of the day, I know nobody in this community will betray you. Because in order for her to accept that somebody in that community will betray him, she would have to accept that somebody in the community betrayed them. You know, like somebody that she trusts, somebody that she works with is a traitor. And so she was like, nobody here would betray you. And he was like, yeah, but somebody here did. Like, I wouldn't be laying here almost dead, because clearly that was their goal. That was their intention, was to kill me. So, let me just tell you, I wrote this down. This is how the Black Daniel is described, okay? I'm going to give you some of the adjectives, okay? We know he's described as mulatto, all right? Meaning he light, bright, mixed, you know, all that good stuff. So he's described as mulatto. He's described as being big, very strong, okay? Speaks French. That's important. Seems to be angry, has an attitude, stubborn, and determined. So these are some of the adjectives that are used to describe him. And we see him in these first couple of chapters. He is rude sometimes, okay? He's downright rude sometimes. But the thing that I love about Hester is that Hester gives as good as she got, child. Hester gives as good as she got. So that's chapter 1 and a little bit of chapter 2. So let's go on into chapter 2, okay? Now, we find out that there are slave catchers in the area. And so she's nervous because she knows that they're looking for the man that she has in her basement. And she goes to church, and they get the rest of the family. We forgot all about the other family that was there. She gets them on their merry little way, you know, right after church on that Sunday. And they decided that they were going to go into Canada. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is, along the border between the United States and Canada, there's a very large African descendant population. I can't call them African Americans because they live in Canada, but a very large black, I'll just say, listen, if y'all don't like the word black, I'm sorry, but there's a very large black population, and a lot of those, again, can trace their heritage back to being free slaves that were, you know, trying to run through the United States. Once upon a time, getting to the North was good enough. But then you had the Fugitive Slave Act of, I want to say 1850, don't quote me on the year, and that kind of changed the game, because that law basically said that slave catchers, if a slave owner believed that you were his property, then basically you could be put back into slavery. And if you guys ever saw the movie 12 Years a Slave, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And so a lot of people said, well, you know what, I ain't going to just stop here in the North. I'm going to just keep going into Canada, because they can't come into Canada. And so you started seeing more and more of the free slaves who got to the North would cross that border into Canada, going through Michigan, going through New York, and getting into Canada. Anyway, that's the history of me, y'all. I'm sorry. Moving on. So, once again, Hester is a little bit nervous about the fact that, you know, her trying to wrap her brain around the fact that somebody that she lived, that, you know, in her circle could betray them. So, we find out that her Aunt Catherine, we found out her Aunt Catherine had passed away a few months prior. But Aunt Catherine was a very big abolitionist. That's the other thing I need y'all to understand too. We had a large population of freed blacks up north that, and a lot of them were abolitionists and they were a part of the movement. And so this is a group we're going to be talking about in this book. And Aunt Catherine started the Detroit Ladies Abolition Circle. Of course, it was a secret society. It wasn't like out in the open. And they would meet once a month under the guise of a sewing club to discuss, you know, what they had going on, discuss what was going on the Underground Railroad, collect money for, you know, cargo coming through and things of that nature. Aunt Catherine had founded the group 10 years earlier. I'm reading from the book now. And the organization had grown to almost 150 members. And this one I'm going to tell you guys as well. At the end of all of Beverly Jenkins' books, she always has a bibliography. So you can go and find where she got her information from. Again, she gets so deep into black history and so much of history that a lot of people didn't know existed, that she gives you the references that you guys can, so we, because I've done it, you know, gone and read some of this stuff that she's read as well. So they're meeting, and because there are slave catchers in the area, and a lot of these people are former slaves, they don't, a lot of the women didn't show up this particular night. And while they were meeting, the Sheriff Lawson came knocking at the door. And Sheriff Lawson had some slave captors with him, one by the name of Ezra Shue. Now, Ezra Shue is described, he is not described very nice, okay? He's described as stinking, teeth rotten, hair all stringy, okay? Clothes nasty and dirty, all right? And he is very rude to Hester, but again, because of the Fugitive Slave Act, all he has to have is a writ, and he has the right to search these homes. But the thing I like is that Sheriff Lawson is a friend of theirs, and so he made sure that Ezra searched and got the hell up out of there. Now, Ezra was immediately taken aback by the fact that you had this black woman living in this really nice house. And she said, well, my grandfather built it. This land was gifted to him for fighting in the Revolutionary War. And Ezra was like, what are you talking about? Ain't no black people fighting to live. Ain't no, well, he said niggas, you know. He said, ain't nobody fighting the Revolutionary War. What, are you crazy, woman? We didn't fight in the Revolutionary. Y'all didn't fight, not we, y'all. Y'all didn't fight in the Revolutionary War. And again, history will have y'all think that the first war we fought in was World War I, World War II. No, ma'am. We have fought in every war that the United States has been involved in since it became a country, including the Revolutionary War. And this was the gift that was given to her grandfather. And again, it was built specifically to help slaves escape, right? So that's how long her family has been in the business of the Underground Railroad, which again makes it so crazy that her father would even allow himself to be sold into slavery, right? But whatever. Love is what it is, child. So the other thing, so Ezra leaves, and, you know, pretty much as soon as Ezra leaves, the rest of the women leave to go home, and, you know, all of that, being very careful to go home. Now, the other thing we find out is Aunt Catherine was able to find Hester. And she had been sent down to the Indigo farms down in South Carolina. And we found out the name of the book comes from the nickname that the Black Daniel ends up giving her, because his eye is still swollen shut, and so he can't see her that clearly. And he describes her as passable looking, right? He didn't describe her as beautiful or all that. And the only thing he can make out clearly are her hands. And her hands are blue from working with the dye her whole life. And we find out later on in the book her feet and her hands are blue because as a kid she had to stomp the dye with her feet, and then as she got older she used her hands. And so she always has to wear gloves, because the minute they see that she has blue hands, it would automatically give her away. But of course in the 1800s, wearing gloves, women wearing gloves out in society wasn't a big deal. And so he starts calling her Indigo. And he was like, well, does that offend you? She was like, no, it doesn't offend me. And she tells him about the slave catchers being in the area and being close by. And of course that makes both of them very nervous, right? So that's pretty much the end of chapter 3, you guys. And I know a lot of y'all have read further on. And so the schedule, if you weren't there, the schedule is today you'll get chapters 1 through 3. I'm gonna aim for Wednesday or Thursday for you to get chapters 3 through 9. 3 through 4 through 6. 4, 5, 6. Lord, I can't add and subtract. And then on Monday, we will go live and discuss chapters 1 through 9. That makes sense? All right. Y'all let me know what y'all are thinking about this book, how y'all feeling about this book. Try not to leave comments that are too far ahead of chapters 1 through 3, because there are people who are reading the book and they may not be as far as you. So you don't want to spoil it for anybody. I'll see y'all on the other side.